Hi everyone, this is Graham from LSAT Hacks, and this video is about quantity words on the LSAT and their negations. And this is a topic that people often find quite difficult to master, but I think part of the problem is that the way it's presented is overcomplicated. While this is not necessarily the easiest thing to get an intuition for, the fundamental base of what it is quite simple. And I'm going to try and present that and give you a way to think about this that'll hopefully make it easier to learn. So, what do I mean by quantity word? I mean something like most or all, or something that has a quantity. And I would like to think about these in terms of ranges. So think of a range from 0 to 100, meaning like 0 to 100%, though forget about percent, so you don't need to think about it for this purpose. So on this basis, all would be 100, none would be 0. And when I say range, what I mean is if I have a word like many, for example, that's like somewhere within 1 to 100. Like maybe it's, I don't know, anything from 20 to 100. Like you wouldn't say 19% is many, but you might say 20% is many. So that's what I mean by a range. When you hear many, you shouldn't think of a word like 37%. It's more like a possibility that it could be anywhere from 20 to 100. So that's what I mean by a range. Now let's look at the ranges of the most common quantity words. So we've got our ranges. Our full range is from 0 to 100. So the first one is none. That's easy. That's 0. The next one is some. Now, this is the one that gets people confused. Some can be anything from 1 to 100. Most people think some has to be a plural, but here's an example. Let's say that you had like a barrel full of apples, and I asked you, did they taste good? And you try one, you could then say, well, at least some of them do taste good. That would be an accurate statement, even though you've just tried one apple. Could be the rest are rotten, but at least some are tasty. And, you don't have to think too deeply about this. If you just say, okay, some means one, got it, then that's really all you need to know. Now, most is anything from 51 to 100. Of course, if I wasn't using whole numbers, it could be like 50.5. But the point being is that it's got to be more than half. So 51 to 100. And all is 100. So far, so good, I think. And so remember, if I say something like, most people approve of this, you don't want to think in terms of a specific number. You don't want to say, oh, well, he means 96%. No, I'm talking about a range, 50 to 100. A range is how I want you to think about all numbers. The LSAT expects you to know this uncertainty, that it might be 51, it might be 100, it might be 72, it might be 86. You can't say. So you have to keep both ends in your mind. And if we're saying, most people are happy, so we're almost certainly going to find a happy person. Well, that doesn't follow, because it could be only 51% of people are happy. So you have to always think from the start of the range and the end of the range and think in terms of possibilities. So if it's just something like, some people support you, well, that's not helpful at all, because it could be just one person supports you, or everybody supports you. So thinking in terms of ranges is the single most helpful thing you can do to think about LSAT quantity words. And this also makes it easy to negate. Negating means just adding a not to a statement, but think in terms of ranges. So here's these numbers again. Now let's say I want to see the negation of none. By the way, by negation, I mean like making something false, but in like the slightest way. So if I say my team's going to win every game this year, you don't negate me by saying no, you're going to lose every game. You say no, you're not going to win every game. You might lose at least some. That's how you want to think about negations in terms of the LSAT. It's not like a polar opposite disagreement. So let's negate these. Not none. Well, you just say, okay, it's not 0, and it's the whole rest of the range. So the rest of the range is 1 to 100, because the range is 0 to 100. If I say it's not 0, then 1 to 100 is what's left. So anything that's 1 to 100 is not none of the things. Not some. It's not 1 to 100, so we're left with only 0, because that's in the range of 0 to 100. If I get rid of 1 to 100, only 0 is left. What about most? If I say not most, well, it's not 51 to 100, so we start at 0, and we go to the biggest number that isn't 51, which is 50. So not most is 0 to 50, because 50 out of 100 is half. That's not most, it's exactly half. And not all Well, we've got a range of 0 to 100. If we take out 100, we're left with 0 to the biggest number that isn't 100, which is 99. So not all is anything from 0 to 99. So, if I say, like, you're going to lose this fight, not all of your soldiers are alive. Well, that's not very convincing, because it could be that 99% of your soldiers are alive. You really have to think in terms of range and think, like, when you say not all, it could be 99. It could be the biggest thing. But that's all you have to do to negate numbers. You just think, what is it in terms of a range, and then not that. Now, let's just look at a few other quantity words. Generally speaking, on the LSAT, words just have their plain English meaning. So if I say a few, some people will try and say, like, oh, that must mean some. It must mean 1 to 100. But no, few doesn't mean that. Few means, like, 3 to 5. And I've never seen, I think there's, like, one LSAT question that tests the difference between this. Normally, if you say few, it works the same as some on the LSAT, so that's why people say it does. But if you ever saw an argument that said there are a few people here, so there's 100% of people here, well, that's not correct. So words do have their everyday meanings. Several is like 5 to 7. Many is like context dependent, but it's probably like, I don't know, 20 to 100 or 30 to 100, or, like it all depends on the context, and this is not a very important distinction, but if you're going to say not many, then it would be like 1 to 19 or 1 to 29, or again, the LSAT is not going to be that precise about this, but you just have to know roughly what these words mean. The only funny thing is, like, majority, probably, likely, usually, all of those on the LSAT seem to be synonyms for most, and I'm not sure that likely actually has that meaning in everyday English, but that seems to be how the LSAT uses it, so you should take those words to be 51% or more. But that's pretty much it for quantity words and their negations. There's a bit you could say about combining some statements with all statements, which I'll leave for another video on conditional logic. But that's it. These are the main quantity words to know. None, some, most, all. These are their ranges. And you got to think in terms of the range, that if I say most, you can't think of like one specific thing. You think of a range of possibilities. And I think that's the biggest thing to learn about quantity words in the LSAT generally, is that you're thinking in terms of multiple possibilities rather than one single reality. And if you get your heads around that, this solves a lot of stuff, even outside of quantity words. That a lot of stuff is just about what are the possibilities in the situation rather than what's the one single thing. And this applies a lot to law, too. A lot of law is about proving what might be the case or what is possible given the hard facts that we know. And you have to imagine a range of possibilities. But anyway, that's how you do it with quantity words. And so I hope this has been helpful. This has been Graham Blake from LSAT Hacks. Check out the site. There's a bunch of free explanations if you want to do that to help study for practice tests. And good luck. So a student asked something related to this video. Should you draw quantity words? Because, you often see a term like, I don't know if you say, most pets are cats. You would draw something like P most C. Now, in the context of like negating quantity words and figuring out what quantity words mean, should you draw this? No. The only time you should draw quantity words is when you're combining them with conditional statements. Like if all cats have tails, then you can say most pets have tails. But this is a topic for another video, but just know that in terms of like understanding quantity words and negating them, this kind of diagramming is not useful at all. It's a totally separate thing. Making these diagrams is just to understand what they mean in order to combine them with other statements. But if you're just looking at a most statement or an all statement and trying to figure out what it means and its negation, you shouldn't do these drawings.